Sir, the first question, what are the realistic goals of the war that Ukraine can achieve, considering the latest aid packages from United States, Great Britain, Australia, and others?
So I'm relieved that this aid package has finally been approved, even though the Congress wasted 8 months getting to that decision. Um, it's a significant amount of capability that's coming, but of course, it's not enough to win the war. I think what it does, it buys time for Ukraine to stabilize the front, to improve their protection of civilian population, to be able to hit targets, more targets inside Crimea and other Russian occupied territories of Ukraine. Um, but it does give time for Ukraine to be able to grow the size of their own army, which they've got to do. And it buys time for other countries, European countries, as well as Canada, to provide more aid. So it's helpful, uh, but not decisive. What's probably is most important, in my view, is that it sends a message to the Kremlin that the West is not going to turn their back on Ukraine. Now, the Russians' only hope for winning is that we quit. That's the only way Ukraine fails is if we quit, if we don't do what we should to help. This is a message to the Kremlin that we're not going to quit.
Is the United States still the leader, the global leader, in defending the international law order, and is it prepared to fulfill this role?
We should be. Um, I think that this is something the United States with our allies has to get organized for victory, to look strategically at the global challenges that we face, that collectively we face: Russia, Iran, China, North Korea. And I think we would be wise to look at these as parts of one big strategic problem. I mean, Russia's most reliable ally is Iran, and vice versa. China is helping Russia while getting really cheap gas and oil from Russia. North Korea, of course, provides ammunition to Russia. So if we were able to, if we made the prioritization of helping Ukraine defeat Russia, then I think Iran would be isolated. They would not have aid coming from Russia. They would be more isolated, um, less able to continue supporting their proxies, the Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Um, and then, of course, China, I think, would be deterred. China would say, "Well, the West is serious about defending the so-called international rules-based order." So by having this sort of priority and clearly defined end states, and then of course that means integrating all the elements of power, not just military but economic power, closing all the holes in the sanctions, working diplomatically with all of our allies and partners to keep pressure on China, for example, from giving aid to Russia. That's what's required, is getting organized. That's a long way of saying, yes, we absolutely have the capability. Do we have the political will and vision? That's the question for me.
Is it still possible for Ukraine to win the war and drive the Russians off its land? Or is it considered a victory to halt, to stop the Russians advance on Ukrainian soil?
I think this is, first of all, yes, of course it's possible, but US and Germany in particular have got to commit to that. Ukraine will decide what victory is, but they have made it clear, I think, and it's also in our interest that Russia is ejected back to the 1991 borders. So sovereignty is restored. Thousands of kidnapped children are brought back home. Um, War crimes, criminals, Russians who are guilty of war crimes are held accountable. These are the kind of things that should be the end state for the U.S. and Germany as well as Ukraine. So absolutely, it's possible to do that. I mean, look, after 10 years of war, almost 10 and a half years of war, Russia with all the advantages, still does not control more than 20% of Ukraine. And we, the West, have not even tried yet. I mean, we haven't mobilized our economies. We haven't done all the things necessary to ensure sanctions really work. And we haven't even committed to Ukraine winning. And yet, look where it is. So imagine if we committed to helping Ukraine win, how different this would be. Of course, Ukraine has a lot to fix here. It's not good enough. Their current personnel situation, that they don't have, that they have not fixed their personnel situation to get more women and men into the armed forces. There are legal issues, legislative issues, but it really is about political will in Kyiv as well.
Ukrainians are obviously running out of ammunition. What can be done with this, and what isn't done but could be done?
So I spoke with a senior official from the European Defense Agency a few months ago who was working on trying to help find 1 million rounds of artillery ammunition. And I learned from this official that there is difficulty in getting the nations to even say what they have and getting industry to say what they can produce. So this is all about political will. I think actually there's a lot of ammunition out there, but the majority of ammunition that's produced in Europe actually goes outside of Europe to customers in the Middle East and Africa. So if there was sufficient political will to do this, then nations could reprioritize where they sell what they have, and they would protect companies that reprioritize where they sell what they have. So there is enough ammunition out there. President Pavel of the Czech Republic recently said, "Hey, I found 800,000 rounds," and then he found more. So it's out there. It's about leaders summoning the political will to do what needs to be done.
I have my last question. It is not a typical question. It's a question of my friend. I have a friend. He was an infantry major in the Canadian Army and retired because of war in Ukraine. He is fighting on the side of Ukraine alongside Belarusian fighters in the Kalinovsky regiment. His name is David Smith, and David Smith invented a question that I would like to ask. The question is about Belarus. European leaders seems to finally be waking up to the threat that Russia poses to European security, and Russia was able to launch its invasion of Ukraine in large part because Putin can rely on Belarus as a staging ground for such attacks. Given that Belarus is the land bridge to Europe, it is literally Putin's war path onto the continent. Should European leaders be focusing on how to free Belarusians from Lukashenko regime? Wouldn't a free Belarus contribute to European security by containing Russian aggression? Why is this left out of the conversation? NATO leaders don't seem to realize that Ukraine and Belarus are on one war, one battlefield. Hasn't anyone looked at map? It was his question.
Okay, well, it's an excellent question. And of course, I think as I understand the point of his question, yes, of course, it's in the benefit of all of Europe, of all free people, that the people of Belarus become free from the Lukashenko regime and whoever might follow Lukashenko, so that they cannot be this proxy for Russia or offer a staging ground. Fortunately, it seems that Russia has not been able to or not willing to do what was necessary to totally take over in Belarus. And I think that the example of what's happening in Georgia right now and what has happened in Azerbaijan and Armenia should give courage to people of Belarus. I mean, I'm looking like you are every day at video of hundreds of thousands of young Georgians that are out marching in the street because they reject what the Georgia Dream government, which is a proxy or a puppet of the Kremlin, is trying to do there. And Georgians want to be free. And what's interesting is that Russian troops have pulled out of Armenia There are no, or you're pulling them out because they need them so desperately in Ukraine. And it doesn't seem like that they're going to show up to help the government of Georgia either. So I wonder if you saw the return of mass protests in Belarus, would there be Russian support, or would Russia have the ability to support Lukashenko's regime in suppressing that kind of protest? I don't know that, but what's happening now is a different situation from a couple of years ago when there were huge protests in Belarus. I think it's a different situation. And if we're thinking strategically, we should be looking for ways to isolate Russia, to make Russia's political, diplomatic, and economic challenges more severe. That would have a significant improvement on the overall security of Europe.
Thanks a lot, sir, for these words. I've been talking just half an hour ago to famous Ukrainian journalist and army officer Taras Berezovets, and he told me that the Ukraine, they are considering very seriously the potential threat of new attack from the Belarus. Despite now it's looked like, quite peaceful, this border of Belarus and Ukraine. They knew for sure that Putin has this kind of plans, probably to attack Kyiv from the north again from the territory of Belarus. So I hope that the politicians and military personnel in Brussels, in Washington, they understand the importance of Belarus for the security of the whole region, for whole Europe. And as you understand it well. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Sergey. I always enjoy our conversations. And at the end of the day, it really does boil down to political will.